Hello everybody and welcome to this month's Bangkok RELO webinar. My name's Katie Wood and I'm going to be your host today. I'm a teacher trainer with AUA Thailand, and today I'm very pleased to welcome to our monthly webinar Arthur Lang. And Arthur will be talking about exploring online resources for teachers. Very useful and interesting topic. Arthur is a teacher and teacher trainer who has extensive experience, a lot of it in Asia, and particularly with state school teachers in-service teacher training. He's also, like all of us, recently become interested in applying his materials design experience to the online environment, which we're all changing to now. So hello everybody and welcome. There is one thing that I'd like to say before we start. In the chat box, can you please remember to switch to all panelists and participants, please? And then if you're writing in the chat box, we can all see it. So welcome everybody. Feel free to say hello in the chat box now. I can see we have Eve in Bangkok and we have some participants from Myanmar. Wonderful. Welcome. Okay. So I will hand you over to Arthur and let's start on this great topic. Hi, Arthur.
Hi, thanks very much, Katie, for that nice introduction. Can everybody hear me okay, first of all? Good.
Yeah. So, great.
Yeah. I wanted to talk to you today about online resources, as Katie mentioned, because this is a very topical subject. A lot of us are stuck in our homes at the moment, more than we're used to. And the internet is a really important resource for us in our teaching. But online resources have a lot of challenges. As you all know, the internet is an enormous place, and sometimes it's very difficult to know where to go and where to find things. Ideally, you want to be able to frequently go back to the same place for new and interesting material. So today we're going to be talking about how and where to find useful resources. Another really tricky question is, how do you know if the resources are any good? Sometimes it's very hard to see the wood for the trees. There's so much stuff out there that it's difficult to be selective and to find the perfect thing for your class. Mm. So those are the things we're going to be talking about today. But I want to start by getting a little bit of information from you. So we're going to do a quick poll. I'd like to know, what online resources do you currently use? We're going to give you some options to select. And what do you currently do related to online resources to help you develop as a teacher? So I'll put the options on the screen and Katie will run the poll for you.
Yeah. There we go. So we'll have the same information here on the poll. Let me start that now. You can tick more than one answer, by the way. So you can choose one or maybe 3 or 4, up to you. Here we go. Okay, so let's see what people think about this, Arthur.
So while everybody's completing this, Katie, what about you? Which of these resources do you use quite a lot?
I look a lot at websites providing teaching resources. I like to sometimes take them as they are, or sometimes I'll use a particular website and then adapt the resources from that website. And actually,
adaptation's really important, isn't it? I mean, we've already mentioned that some resources are very good and some are not exactly appropriate, and you have to make changes to them.
Exactly. And I think one of the important questions you're going to be looking at and answering is, you know, how do we decide if they're the right things for us when we find them?
Right.
So few people voting now, and so far the leading answer is also websites providing teaching resources. So I'll give you 30 more seconds. Anybody who would like to vote? Interesting. Okay, so I'll end the poll and we can see the results.
Great.
So there we are. Can you see that, Arthur?
Yeah. So this is quite interesting. Bear in mind that I'm only just digesting this now. So it's not surprising that everybody would go to websites providing teaching resources. And it's good to see that half of you are also familiar with YouTube as a resource to help you with your teaching. Interesting that only 2 people use dictionaries and language resources. I'll come back to that in a minute. And online journals and publications, I imagine that people are worried about spending money on reading material. A lot of journals are very expensive. And some of the information is written in very complicated English and quite inaccessible. So we'll be looking later at a free journal option, which is very accessible and relatable for teachers. And half of you also share on Facebook groups, so that's great. So you use the internet to learn about new activities and improve language awareness. Okay, so this improving language awareness is what I think dictionaries and language resources are for. So if I can just go back to my slide now, I've tried to put the answers on the right in the same order as the resources on the left. YouTube videos can be a great place for learning about new activities or seeing a new activity done in a different classroom. Dictionaries and language resources can really help you to improve your language awareness. Even someone like me who's been speaking English all their lives, I constantly have questions, particularly about things like spelling. So I often go on to the Oxford Dictionary or Merriam-Webster Dictionary online to just quickly check that I've got something right. I wonder if you do too. It's a really useful resource. The websites providing teaching resources, I've given you a few examples here, and we're going to look at 2 of them in detail later. One Stop English has lots of activities that you can take pretty quickly into the classroom. And the other 2 websites we'll look at later. Online journals can be paid for and expensive, or they can be free. So I'm going to be talking about the International House Journal, which is available at the IH World website. But there's also a website called Lexical Lab, which has lots of interesting articles on how to teach vocabulary. We also mentioned places where you can share your ideas with other teachers, and we'll be looking at IATEFL SIGs, or special interest groups, which all have Facebook pages. Finding new materials to use in class. This is what we use these websites for. Learning from other teachers and sharing with other teachers is something that we can do by reading journal articles or using Facebook groups and forums. So today, let's start with YouTube, because I think it's worth looking at how to use this platform effectively. I'm going to begin by showing you a quick video of about 4 minutes. It's a speaking activity called an opinion dictation, and it's presented by Dave Spencer for Macmillan Education ELT and Gateway. While you're watching the video, I'd like you to think about a few simple questions. Maybe you should take a screenshot of these questions because I'm going to switch to YouTube in a minute. So the questions are, how does Dave Spencer set up the activity clearly? And why does the activity work well? Why is it a good speaking activity? And finally, the most important one, could you use this type of activity in your own class with your own students? Okay, now I'm going to show you the video.
This next activity is a simple way of setting up a discussion. The activity begins as a normal dictation, but a dictation where the students' opinions are the center of attention. Always good for engaging teenage students. The beauty of this exercise is that, as you'll see, the students practice listening, writing, and speaking. You need your notebook, and can you put it like this, horizontal? And what I want you to do is to divide the page into 3 columns. You can see the first column says, I agree. Second column, I disagree. Third column, it depends. And when you have your 3 columns ready, I'm going to dictate a short sentence to you, and I want you to write it in the column that expresses your opinion. If you agree, if you disagree, or if it maybe depends, okay? Easy sentence to start with, for example, okay? So I dictate the sentence, you write it down. Football is the best sport in the world. The first part of the activity offers the students a moment to think quietly as they decide their opinion, rather than forcing them to speak straight away. This ultimately helps them to have more to say in the last part of the activity. Second sentence, life without my mobile phone would be awful. And the third one, everybody should speak English in today's world. Okay, you've got your sentences in different columns. What I want you to do is to compare your sentences with your partner, see if you have the same ideas, if you agree or if you disagree. If you disagree, then explain why you decided to put it in this column and not in the other column. Okay, so in pairs with your partner.
Okay, so football for you is the best sport in the world, no? Okay. Life without my mobile phone, it would be awful. You have to agree?
I disagree.
I disagree.
If I don't have my,
It depends.
if I don't have my mobile phone, I don't mind.
Yeah, but sometimes you need your mobile phone.
In this type of activity, I generally monitor the whole class and help if needed. I may make a note of any common mistakes, but generally I'm happy if most students are at least staying on the task in English and there are no breakdowns in communication. Okay, let me stop you. That's excellent. Did you generally have similar opinions or not?
Yes.
Generally, yes. Okay, I want to look at some other topics to see if we agree or disagree about these topics. So we're on page 78, okay, of the student's book. You can see that this is a simple but effective way to set up a discussion on any topic you like. I chose a random mixture of sentences for discussion, but you could dictate a group of sentences that are all connected to just one topic. In fact, why not conclude the activity by getting the students to share their opinions with the rest of the class? Don't forget to check out the Gateway Facebook page, where there are weekly teaching tips to help you with your lessons and also access to Gateway worksheets.
Okay. So that was a short video of a speaking activity with some explanation from Dave Spencer. And here are the 3 questions that I asked you. I'll just give you 1 minute to think about these, and then I'll share my answers with you. Feel free to put something in the chat box if you have a good idea.
Nice task.
Okay, so I'm going to share my answers with you now. So the first question is, what does Dave Spencer do to set up the activity clearly? Well, I don't know if you noticed his voice and the way he's speaking, but it's very clearly enunciated. And he uses language that the students will understand. He also uses the board very effectively because he has modelled on the board behind him what he wants the students to write down. Why is the activity effective? Well, we have to think about what the activity is for. He wants to contextualize his lesson and get students speaking before he moves onto the serious study section looking at his workbook or course book. So can students start speaking straight away, or do they need any preparation time? Spencer gives them some preparation time using this opinion dictation. Think about the statements that he said to the students. They were all very familiar and relatable. So for a group of 16-year-old Spanish students, he asks them, well, he asks what they think about football and mobile phones and learning English. These are topics that they will all relate to very easily. It's a subjective activity. There's no right or wrong answer. And this creates what's called an opinion gap. So some students think one thing, some students think another, and that naturally leads to communication. So getting students to discuss their personal opinions is really important. Finally, could you use it in your own class? Well, I call this activity very low maintenance, meaning it's not very hard to set it up. Some activities require students to move around and look at things on the walls, but with this one, they can just sit down facing a partner and talk. You don't need any materials prep because the students design their own piece of paper in the class very quickly. So I think it's a great activity. I hope that that you like it too.
Yes, in the chat box, people are saying that they think it's great. It's very involving a lot of group discussion.
Good. Yeah, and I think there are so many different activities similar to this. The basic format is that the teacher gives the students a statement, and the students have time to discuss it. There are lots of different ways of running this type of activity, but doing it as a dictation gives the students that bit of extra time to think about what they're going to say. Okay, so I've shown you one video from YouTube. I don't know if you know that presenter. Maybe you already know him. But the important thing about YouTube is that it helps us to find out more once we're in the system. So once you've seen one video, it's much easier for you to find others. The important thing here is the Up Next menu on the right-hand side. Do you recognize these students? This is the class that we just watched. So I want you to imagine that you're watching this video on YouTube. Now have a look in the right-hand column. It says Up Next, and you can see Opinion Dictation, Macmillan, Spain. That's the video that we're watching. And then underneath, there's Dictogloss Dictation. So this is another dictation activity. This means that once you're in the system, once you've watched one video that's useful, YouTube will line up lots of other videos that you can watch. You could spend the whole day watching these videos. I'm sure some of you have. So let's move on now. That was an example where I gave you some help. I gave you the name of somebody to look at and you watched his video. But what about if you're starting from scratch? How can you find useful resources by yourself? I think keywords are really important here. So if you look at the white words on the blue background, you've got lots of different aspects of teaching and different class types. So do you teach monolingual classes that only speak Thai? Or do you teach any special needs students? Are you worried about giving clear instructions in English? Think about what your need is and think about the key word, the most important topic word to describe your need. And you can put this word in the search function on YouTube. So here's an example. As Katie mentioned, I've done a lot of my training and teaching in Asia, specifically in China. And in China, teachers in the state school system struggle with very large classes. And it's not uncommon for them to have 50 or 60 students in their class. This makes it very hard for them to build confidence to try out new activities. So you can go on YouTube and you can type teaching large classes. As you can see, YouTube is now offering videos on teaching large classes online or even on Zoom, because this is the world we live in now. Everybody's teaching online or on Zoom. But here, once you click on teaching large classes, straight away, you've got these useful videos coming up. Teaching English in China, how to manage large classes, class management for large classes. So YouTube helps you to find things as long as you know the keyword that you need. You can also type in a particular activity. So we just had dictation. If you type in dictation, you might get running dictation or drawing dictation. YouTube provides some suggested activities that you can look at or look for. So the search function and the Up Next menu are very useful. Now, we can either find videos by going straight to YouTube, or we can go to YouTube through another website. I want to show you the example of the Department of State's website, americanenglish.state.gov. You'll see that in the resource column, they have webinars. There's actually lots of different webinars about different types of teaching that you can watch here.
Like ours that we're doing now, right?
Sorry?
Like ours that we're doing now will be on there soon.
Yeah. Right. And you can go and watch these webinars, and it links to YouTube. Okay. So the final question about YouTube videos, and perhaps the most challenging one, is how do I know if a video is any good? How do I know if it's going to help me? Experienced teachers will probably get a feeling for that very quickly. Maybe you should try videos that are recommended through your professional network. So I've become part of your professional network today, and I'm making some recommendations now that you can start with. If the video was produced by a trusted English language teaching company, for example, Macmillan ELT is a very trusted publisher. So let's have a look at some of the names that you could start with. Here are different types of YouTube videos that you might want to have a look at. Some on young learner activities, those focused on class management, songs in the classroom, activities for teenagers, broadly speaking, teaching techniques, and how to use online tools. So these are all things that teachers might be interested in. And here are some names. I suggest you take a screenshot of this page because these names are quite useful. Carol Reed has been writing and generously sharing resources related to young learners for many years, and there's a lot of fantastic stuff available on YouTube. I would particularly recommend her story time segments. They're very good indeed. Sue Cowley is also focused on young learners and particularly on the behavior and management of young learners in difficult classes. There might be very useful stuff for you from her YouTube clips. Zhong Kang-shin has some excellent videos on the use of song. We just had a look at Dave Spencer. Nick Peachy has a lot of fantastic resources related to how teachers can use online tools. So it's definitely worth going to his websites and also looking at his contributions on YouTube. Finally, if you're looking to improve your teaching techniques, for example, to get better at modeling and drilling, or to get better at managing feedback, have a look at the videos of Jim Scrivener, which are available on YouTube. Sometimes he presents them himself, or sometimes it's one that he has recommended, but they're all very useful. Okay, so that's it for talking about YouTube. Katie, what do you think? Do you think YouTube is a useful resource for the teachers today?
Absolutely it is. I think it's a great way to get a window as well into other classrooms and see things actually being done, because you know, we can all read quite a lot, for example, about teaching techniques, but I think very often it's much more helpful to have read about it and then see it in action. And YouTube, especially if you've got recommendations, is a great way to to do that, to experience different classrooms and watch different teachers and learn from them.
Absolutely. I think Katie raises a really important point there, which is that when we go to an online resource website, what we can see is text. Maybe it's a set of instructions for setting up an activity, and then you've got the activity on the next page. But with a YouTube video, we can really visualize how this activity is going to go in our classroom. And that can help us feel more confident about doing it ourselves. Okay, so YouTube's great. And I hope that I've given you some useful tips on how to use it. Let's move on now and have a look at some resource websites. So teachers are busy, aren't they? Almost constantly. What teachers want more than anything else is something they can find quickly, print, copy, and run into the classroom with. So I want to introduce some websites that have lesson plans and procedures and materials for activities. So once again, the Department of State website has a range of resources, including ideas for lessons. And you can search for them in the resource column. And I've given you one example here of how teachers could bring issues related to COVID-19 into the classroom for young learners. Obviously, it's a big topic these days, but it's difficult to talk about this with children effectively. So here are some ideas, and if you click on Go to Original Post, you can read the article or the procedure that will help you with this in the classroom. So this website's very useful with a range of activities. I want to focus now on teachingenglish.org.uk. Just very quickly, how many of you have already used this website? Just write yes or no in the chat box.
Okay, let's have a look in the chat. Okay, quite a few yeses, maybe kind of 60-40 yes, no, I'd say.
Right, good. Well, I'm glad that this website's already familiar to some of you. Katie, do you use this one?
I do, particularly thinking about, if we're thinking about lesson plans for young learners, because there's such a wide range of complete and comprehensive self-contained lesson plans.
Yeah, that's great. I think I use it and I recommend it to my trainees on training courses. I think it's such a great place to start. So one thing that I like about this website is how well organized it is. So let's have a look at it now. To navigate this website, you need to start with the top row of white text. Can you see there's an icon of a house that says professional development. And then in the third column, you've got teaching resources. These have been divided into primary, secondary, and adult, depending on your learners. So most of the work I'm doing at the moment is with secondary school teachers. So we'll have a look at secondary. Once you go into this section, you can find stories and poems, UK history and literature, or the one that most teachers want straight away is activities. So we'll have a look at activities. And then it's divided again, and it gets you to think about the level of your students. Are they beginners? Are they pre-int? Are they intermediate? So everything's very well organized here. I'm going to go for intermediate. And now I've got lots of ideas coming up on the screen. So here, you might find something related to a language point that you want to cover, or you might find something that has a really accessible, engaging topic for your students. So we've got writing a class magazine as a project. We've got a lesson on shopping and how to do a role play, buying and selling in a shop. And we've got how to use present perfect in stories. So, oh, I need to teach present perfect next week. I'll have a look at this one. And now you've got a procedure with an activity that you can take into the classroom pretty quickly. So I can't recommend this website highly enough. I think that there's a lot of very useful stuff here. And as I've just mentioned, it's really well laid out to help you to find what you need. There are other websites too. I'm just going to mention 3 of them. OneStopEnglish.com has, again, lots of activities that you can print and take into the classroom fairly quickly with some explanation of how to conduct them. And there's a website that I've started looking at recently called Fluency First ELT. It's been developed by a trainer colleague of ours, and it's all about speaking activities and speaking tasks in the classroom. It's very modern, and a lot of the topics are related to what's happening in the world now. So that's a useful website to look at. Finally, I'm going to recommend a website that you have to be quite careful with, and this is busyteacher.org. BusyTeacher has a huge range of worksheets, but some of them are more effective than others. They haven't all been selected based on how they might lead to effective teaching. So you have to be quite careful to make sure, first of all, that you don't use this too much, and secondly, that the activity is going to work effectively. And I think this is a really important question. How do I know if an online activity is going to be effective in my class? So this is what I want you to think about now, and then you can share some ideas with me. I'll give you one example. If I'm looking on the internet to find a relevant and useful activity for a language lesson, the first question that I will ask myself is, does this activity practice the language that I want to teach? So if I'm teaching second conditional, does this activity practice the second conditional? That's one example of a question you can ask to help you to know if an activity is effective. I'm going to give you a minute or two, and I want you to think about some other questions that you can ask to check an activity is effective or not. If you have any good ideas, please write them in the chat box.
Let's have a look. Such an important question to ask, isn't it?
What about you, Katie? What questions do you ask yourself when you're evaluating materials that you find online?
Similar to you, but also I think about whether the level is going to be Right. And also something that I think is very important with resources is how long will it take me to set this activity up compared to how long students will actually use it for in the classroom. Sometimes in the past, I've been guilty of, doing a complicated activity that takes quite a long time to set up, and then it doesn't actually generate as much activity time doing it as I've put in for the setup.
Yeah, there are some, we talked earlier with the Dave Spencer activity, the opinion dictation, about it being low maintenance.
Mm-hmm.
Some activities are really high maintenance.
Yes.
And involve a lot of cutting up, as you say. So is it viable really to choose an activity that takes 45 minutes to prepare if it's only going to take 5 minutes of class time?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that one, but it's actually a really important question.
And
Okay.
just coming through on the chat there, Arthur. So Ganga or Ganja, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly, is talking about if the activities are contextual and simple, but contextual I think is a good thing to pick up on.
Yeah, and what you will often have to do, we talked a little bit about adapting materials right at the beginning of this session. You will often find activities which could work very well, but they don't have a Thai flavor or a Myanmar flavor, and you have to find a way to add that. The quickest way to add it is often using visuals. Maybe you could take photos of the neighborhood where your students live, or photos from around the school, and somehow mix them in with the activity to make it feel more contextualized for the students. Okay. Is there anything else, or shall we?
I think you can let's hear your ideas now.
Yeah. So these are some of my ideas when I'm checking whether a resource will be effective or not. So Katie mentioned, is it level appropriate? And that's very important. But also, is it age appropriate?
Mm.
So I don't think it's any good setting up a role play where the task is to rent a flat if you're teaching students who are 11 or 12, because they don't have the financial independence to do this activity in real life. So it might be quite difficult for them to do it in the classroom. Try to find activities that are more authentic to their age and how they actually communicate in real life. Really importantly, is it fun? Does the activity have a competitive element? Is it like a game? Does it involve throwing dice and moving around a board like a board game? Or does it involve students running from one place to another? Try to choose activities that have a fun and engaging element. Normally, the word repetitive has a negative connotation, but I don't think the connotation is negative when we're looking for language activities. If you want students to do controlled practice of new language, repetition is a very good thing. So does the activity get the students to repeat the language several times in slightly different questions or sentences, or with a different partner? This is why activities like Find Someone Who work so well. I mentioned already, does it focus on the language point you have been teaching? That's really important. And I also think it needs to allow students to work together. I mentioned you have to be careful not to use busy teacher worksheets too much. A lot of them are gap fills and matching tasks. These can be useful, but they provide very, very controlled practice. Students don't actually have to say anything to complete those activities. So does the activity encourage students to speak in pairs or groups? I think that's really important for language learning. And going back to the contribution we had from one of you about, is the activity contextual? Well, we can say, is it personalized? First of all, is it close to the students' own lives? But also, does it allow students to share what they think? If we think about the opinion dictation, one of the advantages of the opinion dictation that we watched before was that it gets students to express their own ideas about things that are familiar to them. So I think all of these questions are useful when you're checking the validity of resources. Okay, we're going to move on now to our final area, which is how you can become part of a professional community of teachers online. It's a difficult time for teachers at the moment. I've been very lucky to stay in work all the way through the year, but it's been a difficult adjustment for me to move from teaching in a language center or training in a training center to doing all my work from my study in England. It's very easy to feel isolated from professionals at the moment. Some of us don't have access to our staff rooms. Even if we've gone back to school now, we know that there might be another lockdown because coronavirus hasn't gone away. So it's very important that we move our professional community online. So I want to give you some ideas for how to do that, because teachers are always sharing ideas and reflections online. We're going to start off by looking at background reading. So reading journal articles can be very scary. They're often long, academic, difficult to read, and they might not be useful for your own teaching context. But one place that I really would recommend is the IH World IH Journal. All of the articles in this journal are written by trainers or teachers, people who have real experience just like you. So there are lots of backdated issues that you can go and explore for free. If we have a look at the most recent one, the different articles are all laid out on the front page. I don't know how many of you teach teenagers, but I assume that several of you do. So straight away, you can see there's an article about behavior management and motivation in teenage groups, written by another teacher just like you, facing the same problems that you face. I think this is a really useful resource. The articles are not very long. They're capped at about 1,500 words. So it's not, nobody's asking you to read a whole book. You can have a look at one of these articles in a break between classes. And another really useful place that you can go is Facebook. So there are lots of groups for teachers on Facebook and other social media sites. And and these are important places where resources and ideas are shared. They also advertise events that you might be interested in. So at the moment you're attending this webinar. Maybe it's not your first webinar. If you want to find out about upcoming events, if you join a Facebook forum or a forum on another social media site, you can find out about online events going on at the moment. So one organization which is quite useful for us is IA-TEFL. Every year, normally, they have a huge conference that many teachers attend, but they also have special interest groups where like-minded teachers who teach similar groups can meet and share information. To give you an example, there is a young learners and teenagers special interest group, and you can join it on Facebook by searching as I have done here. But there are other special interest groups if you're teaching at a university, if you want to know more about testing, if you're interested in training and development. There are lots of different special interest groups, and they all have Facebook pages where information is shared. Okay, so let's recap a little bit what we've done, and then I'll bring Katie in for a quick chat to finish. Today we've looked at three main areas where you can use the internet to help you develop. First of all was watching YouTube videos from the classroom. Secondly, we had websites where you can websites where you can access materials and maybe lesson plans. And thirdly, we had the social aspect of professional development, reading other people's articles, sharing resources in a Facebook group, being part of an online community. I hope that all the information I've shared with you today is very useful, and that it helps you to navigate the internet and find the best place for you to go. So I'm just going to sum up with Katie now. Do you think we've covered a lot of useful material today that these teachers can go away with?
Yes, I think so, and we're getting some comments in the chat box saying that is the case. I think it really is a good thing to think about, because, as you said at the beginning, there is so much out there that sometimes I think it's overwhelming. And when we look, we think, oh, I don't know where to start, so I won't, or we have one resource that we go to time and time again.
Absolutely.
So I think it's, the internet is such a great resource. And if we have the tools to navigate it a little bit, then slowly we can find all kinds of assistance. And, we teachers need that, don't we?
I think just one other thing that I've just thought of that I want to share is that when we think about the internet, I think we divide it into different spaces. A space for professional time, a space for more social time, or just messing around. But what we need to realize is that sometimes professional development can happen in unusual places. When I was younger, we're talking maybe 10 years ago, I would never have thought of YouTube as a place where I could grow and develop as a teacher. But now I spend quite a lot of time finding useful resources through YouTube. I used to think YouTube was a place to go to look at funny videos in my spare time. But actually, these sites like YouTube and Facebook can help us a lot. And I'm sure Instagram and TikTok also can provide useful snippets and activities for us.
We have a question, Arthur. If I think we have a few minutes, if you'd like to tackle this one. We're being asked, how about the question of originality in terms of content for a teacher's point of view? So I guess that could be maybe originality, or possibly what we're talking about here is copyright, maybe?
I think, well, I'll say a couple of things. First of all, of course, every time you use anything from somebody else, I think it's important to give recognition that you've done this. So if you take something from an online source, print it out and use it in your classroom, then make sure that you've left the link for where you got it, and make sure you've got the name of the writer if that's available to you. Because yes, the work does come originally from somebody else. But you might also be asking about originality in terms of creativity. And I think that when we use materials as teachers, there are different things that we have to do. We have to select materials. Sometimes we have to adapt materials. So we take something and we change it. By doing that, we are being original. We are being creative. And sometimes we look online, we look in our course book, and we just think, nah, there's nothing I can use here. And that's when we have to create something by ourselves. I think that using online resources and tweaking them and changing them is original and is a creative process for teachers.
Yeah, and I think, just to add to that, Arthur, I think the things that I have on occasion made completely from nothing, I've only got to that stage of being able to really create activities, having spent a lot of time finding activities on the internet, trying them out and thinking, oh, I really like that bit, I could do that with this. And then, so you build up an understanding from different online sources of what works for you and what works with your class.
Absolutely. And I think, Katie, your point's really important, that creating materials originally from scratch is not something that inexperienced teachers should really attempt, and something that you can look forward to after you've been teaching for a number of years. Yeah. Okay. Lovely.
Well, again, we're getting some more comments. People have definitely found the ideas helpful.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to present today. I do think this is an important topic for us at the moment, just because we're having to spend so much of our time online. So shall I wrap up there?
Yes, that would be great.
Okay, thanks.
That's lovely. So thank you very, very much, Arthur. I think lots of practical and theoretical ideas that we can bring together there from the session. So absolutely great. Thank you so much. As usual, I'd like to thank the US Department of State, the Bangkok RELO office, for bringing this webinar together. And I'd also remind everybody that we will be having another one next month. It is in the process of being organized, so please look out on Facebook. Just been talking about Facebook, for the Bangkok RELO Facebook page and the AUA Professional Learning page. Details of the next webinars will follow. So thank you very much, everybody, for your participation and ideas, and thanks again to Arthur.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.